Hey there, deep divers. You ever get that creepy feeling that your school records are going to follow you around forever?
Mm,
Imagine if all that info, and I don't just mean grades and attendance, but everything, ended up in the hands of some tech company.
yeah,
Kind of sends chills down your spine, right?
yeah, for sure.
Well, good news is Ohio is taking a stand with some brand new legislation. Substitute Senate Bill number 29, tackling student data privacy head on. So get ready, because today we're going deep, and I mean deep, into the nitty-gritty of this bill with the one and only expert speaker here to help us break it all down.
Happy to be here.
Whether you're a student, a parent, just someone who cares about their digital footprint, this deep dive is for you. You ready to decode this thing?
Absolutely, let's do it.
This bill, let me tell you, it's a real page-turner. Just kidding. Legal jargon, not exactly a beach read.
Right.
But what I do find super interesting is how this bill tries to strike that balance. You know,
Yeah.
we want schools to use technology, make things better for everyone, but that also means protecting student privacy, especially now that everything's digital.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating, right? It's this delicate balance we have to strike. We want to use technology to enhance how we teach and learn, but at the same time, we have a responsibility to make sure student data is protected. It's a real balancing act.
For sure, and you're totally right. It's not just grades and attendance anymore.
Yeah.
This bill talks about educational support services data. What even falls under that?
It's a great question, and it really gets at how complex education has become. See, the bill defines educational records. Really broadly, we're talking files, documents, anything directly related to a student and kept by the school or, anyone working for them. But then it gets really specific about what's not considered an educational record, which is interesting.
Oh, so it's not a free-for-all with student data. Tell me more about those exceptions.
So let's say a teacher jots down some notes about a student just for themselves, maybe to give to a substitute.
Okay.
Those notes, under this bill, not part of the official educational record.
Makes sense. What about things like employee records?
Good point. Info only about someone who works for the district, like their performance reviews, that also wouldn't be under the educational record umbrella.
Right, so it has to directly relate to the student. What about records from doctors or therapists?
That's a critical one. And the bill makes a specific exception. So records about students 18 and older made by medical or mental health folks treating them, those are kept confidential. Only the people directly involved in that student's treatment can see them.
Gotcha. So extra layers of protection there. Now, let's circle back to that educational support services data. Seems like that's where things get really interesting. What makes that different?
You're right on the money. That term really reflects all those other services schools provide, not just the regular academics. Think about programs helping students with specific challenges, like needing extra help with their studies, or maybe they're struggling with food insecurity.
Right.
This bill recognizes that data about those services, that's sensitive, needs special consideration.
Okay, so extra support, which is great, but we got to use that data responsibly. Can you give me an example to make it crystal clear?
Absolutely. Imagine a school using software to track which students are part of the free or reduced price lunch program.
Okay.
That data, that's incredibly valuable. You can tailor support services to the students who need it most.
Right, like connecting them with food banks or
Yeah.
other resources in the community.
Exactly. But there's always a but, right? That same data, it could be misused.
Oh.
What if that company, the one providing the software, decides to sell that data to marketers?
Oh, no.
Or uses it to target those students with ads? That's what this bill is trying to prevent.
Wow, that's a really good point. So like a double-edged sword, right? You could use data for good, but it can also be exploited.
Precisely. This bill really throws a spotlight on that tension between using data to actually benefit students and the possibility of it being misused. It acknowledges the positive potential, personalizing learning, getting students the support they desperately need, but it also says, hey, we got to be careful about this data ending up in the wrong hands.
So how does it address that? It sounds like Ohio is laying down the law for tech companies that want to work with schools.
You got it. Ohio's sending a clear message. Student data is not something you can just buy, sell, exploit for profit. No more of those free trials that end up costing you your privacy.
Oh, thank goodness. I was starting to get a little creeped out imagining companies making a profit off student data. So they can't sell it, but what else does this crackdown involve?
So the bill is very direct. These technology providers, they cannot sell student data, period. And it's not just about selling. This bill tackles ownership, access, even what happens to the data after a contract ends. It states that any educational records these tech companies create or handle, they ultimately belong to the school district, not the company itself.
That makes a lot of sense. The school's in control of the information.
And to avoid any shady business, access to that data within the tech company, that's strictly limited. We're talking need-to-know basis.
Need to know. Break that down for me.
So only employees who absolutely need access to do their specific job can see it. No one else at the company can just be browsing through student info.
Okay, so there are safeguards in place. Anything else?
And here's the kicker. Once the contract between the school and that tech company is done, the company can't just hold on to the data. They have to either completely destroy it or return it to the school district.
Wow. They really thought of everything. No clinging to student data after the school year ends. We're talking serious protection here.
It's definitely a win. It shows that lawmakers are starting to take this seriously.
So we've talked about these tech companies, but there's another side to this, right? Schools themselves have access to a lot of student data. Does this bill address how schools can use technology? What's stopping them from going full Big Brother on everyone?
That's the million-dollar question. And you're right to bring it up. The bill does address it, but it's a little nuanced. It lays out specific rules for when and how schools can monitor what students are doing on those school-issued devices.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
Well, the good news is schools can't just randomly track your location or, like, turn on your laptop's camera or microphone
Okay, good.
or monitor every single keystroke, without a valid reason. Big Brother's not always watching.
Okay, phew. That's a relief. But you said without a valid reason. What counts as a valid reason in this bill?
Right, and that's where it gets a little, I guess, tricky. The bill does give specific exceptions. Like some are pretty straightforward. Monitoring's allowed if it's directly for instruction, providing tech support, or like proctoring exams.
Right. Those make sense. What else?
They can also monitor if there's a legitimate safety threat or maybe legal stuff the school has to do or even requirements tied to funding.
So, okay, they can't just listen in during study hall, but what exactly is a safety threat? It seems like that could be, I don't know, open to interpretation.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's one part where the bill is a little vague, and it'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out in schools. How broadly will they define safety threat? What kind of safeguards will they have? We need to think about that.
For sure. Something to keep an eye on.
Mm.
Makes you think about the balance between, like, safety and privacy. It's not always black and white.
Absolutely. And that's why, no matter the reason for the monitoring, the bill really pushes for transparency. Schools got to be upfront with parents and students about what they're doing and why.
Transparency's key. Nobody wants to feel like they're being spied on.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? What kind of notifications are we talking about?
So there are a few levels of notification in the bill. First, any contracts the school has with tech companies.
Yeah.
Those have to be disclosed, and parents can read the whole thing.
So no more secret deals with tech companies. Parents can actually see what data is being collected, how it's used, all of that.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right? And it's not just about each individual contract. Schools also have to provide more general notifications about their monitoring practices.
So, like a heads up at the beginning of the year. Hey, we might monitor student activity on these devices. Here's why and how, something like that.
Exactly. And then there's another notification specifically for incidents of monitoring.
Incidents. So if they actually, like, turn on camera remotely or something.
Yep, exactly. In those cases, the school has 72 hours to tell the parent. They got to explain what happened, what made them do the monitoring, which features of the device they accessed, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so they can't just snook around and hope nobody notices. There's some accountability.
Exactly. It's about making sure parents are in the loop and they understand how their child's data might be accessed.
Makes sense. Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier, this educational support services data. This isn't just about protecting privacy. It's also about helping students understand their own, like, digital footprint, right?
Absolutely. This bill really brings up the importance of digital citizenship, especially for kids and teenagers.
When I hear digital citizenship, I usually think about, like, cyberbullying and being safe online. But it's bigger than that, right?
It really is. Digital citizenship means understanding your rights online, the power of your data, how what you share can have consequences. It's about being a responsible and informed citizen in the digital world, basically.
And that's crucial for students, especially with technology being such a big part of education these days. So how do we actually give students those digital citizenship skills? Especially when it comes to something as important as their educational data.
It all starts with education, like
Yeah.
any other important skill, right? We need to teach students about data privacy from a young age, just like we teach them about, online safety.
Yeah, make it part of the curriculum. Help them get, like, what data is being collected, how is it being used, why does it matter?
Exactly. And more than anything, encourage them to ask questions. Let's say they're using a new learning app or something. Sit down with them. Go through those privacy settings together. Help them understand what their choices actually mean online.
So it's about them taking control, not just being along for the ride in this digital world.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about what the school does or what these companies do. It's about the choices each student makes, what
Mhm.
they share, who they share it with. It all adds up.
It's like building their digital footprint, right?
Right.
Leaving a trail of data. And they got to be aware of what that trail says about them.
And that's where this gets even more interesting. This bill is focused on Ohio, but this stuff matters everywhere. As technology becomes, even more ingrained in education, the lines between our physical lives and our digital lives, especially for young people, those lines are getting blurrier.
Yeah, it's a whole new world out there. We got to make sure students have the knowledge, the awareness to navigate it safely and responsibly. This isn't just about protecting their data today. It's about setting them up to be informed digital citizens, for life.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This bill, it's a great step, but it's really just the beginning when it comes to navigating data privacy in this digital age.
And on that note, deep divers, it's your turn to take the reins. What really stuck with you from this deep dive? What questions are still swirling around in your head? Dive into those source materials, share your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, deep divers.